In this video, you will see the modifications it took to transform a Mongoose kick scooter into a 36-volt electric machine. Back in the day, way before electric scooters, this is how we rolled. To start this project, 2 hot pink scooters were found on Craigslist. This scooter has a manufacturer weight limit of 220 pounds. No problem, I got this. Pipe and square blocks were cut, welded to the old frame, and used as spacers. Basically, I'm using the old frame as a jig. A straight edge was placed between the new frame rails. The two outer down tubes were then marked on where they'll be cut. For now, only the two outer tubes will be cut in order to keep my jig intact. Later, after the cross braces are welded in, then I'll be able to cut the last center tube. My favorite tool, the spinning wheel of death. A new cross piece was cut and is ready to weld in. Tack it in place. A temporary brace was welded at the tail end of the frame. Hell yeah, those welds look spectacular. Time to cut the last downpipe. This is the point where I separate the new frame from the jig. Tacked in. More welding. I'm adding a brace here. Checking fitment before it's cut out of steel. The finished brace is ready to be welded in. Unfortunately, I don't have footage of that. The new wheel arrived from wildpowersports.com. This Razor Pocket Mod replacement wheel came complete with tire, tube, drum brakes, freewheel, and 81-tooth rear sprocket. Next up, I need to make some dropouts for the rear wheel to attach to. Notice the oatmeal container used for temporary mock-up until my new motor arrives. For dropouts, I drilled holes into the center of angled steel. Then I cut slots up to those holes. The wheel axle can now slip into the slots. At the tail end of the slot, I welded in a tall joiner nut. When a bolt is threaded through the nut, it serves two purposes. First, it prevents the wheel from ever coming off the backside if wheel nuts ever come loose. Second, it will prevent the slotted opening from expanding under my heavy weight. Now that the nut is welded, I have to cut the center portion of the nut out in order to restore the slot for the wheel axle to enter. The temporary frame brace was cut out and the frame was cut to length. Next, the rear dropouts were clamped and prepared to be welded in. At this point, I didn't film everything as I worked. So let's get up to date. The new motor arrived. It is a Curry 900 watt 24 volt brush motor, which I will be overboosting to 36 volts. I'm an eggs and bacon kind of guy. Oats is for horses. Steel plate was drilled, slotted, and welded to the frame. Angle iron was cut, and mounting holes were drilled in order to mount the motor. With the slotted holes on the motor mounting plate, chain tension can be adjusted as needed. A little clearancing was made on the plate to make way for the chain. A bracket was welded to the frame to hold the drum brake arm. And yet another bracket was welded to the frame to hold the kickstand. I can't hide this mistake. I effed up the frame. Yup. What a shit show. Let me explain. The wheel spacing was a little tight. I wanted to open it up slightly. I laid the frame on its side and placed a floor jack between the frame rails. I then proceeded to jack my frame. Literally. End result, I got the spacing I needed but also slightly kinked the frame. To cover up the wavy frame rail, I used a piece of C-channel steel as a cap, similar to this one, which acts as a cover-up and re-strengthens that area of the frame. The C-channel already had speed holes punched out. So design-wise, it kinda matches the other holes found on this scooter. Crisis averted. Next up, I cut out some thin sheet metal plates to close up the gap that was between the motor mounting plates. I ordered some parts on eBay last month. Why did they take so long?
China!
So I got these Chinese handlebars and a stem that you might see on a folding bike. They have quick releases for height adjustability or quick fold down. Okay, back to the frame so we can finish up the last of the welding. First, I'm adding a slanted footrest which also acts as a cover to protect the rider from the spinning motor and chain. I'm using this angle iron as a top cross brace, but it will need to be trimmed as the motor is interfering with its placement. Very carefully draw straight lines on where to cut. This small bracket was made as a third mounting point for the motor. Like the bottom mounting plate, this bracket is also slotted to allow for chain adjustment. I need to add some gussets to strengthen this area. A cardboard template was made, and the holes were drilled with step bits before the gussets were cut out of steel. Weldable nuts like these were then welded to the footrest, which later we will bolt the platform to. I'm using a pair of hinges on the front side of the foot decking. In order to mount the hinges to the correct height, I welded up some square spacers, and then those were welded to the frame. Holes were drilled and the hinges were then bolted down. On the side of the frame, a threaded weld nut was welded in and a ball stud was threaded into that. For mock-up purposes only, I'm using this old skateboard deck to find the correct mounting points for the gas lift struts. In the future, I wanted an easy option to access the batteries, controller, and wiring. Ideally, you would hide the struts on the inside, but I have limited space available. The final deck width will be wider than the skateboard deck, and the struts will then be a little more hidden. I bought this light bar on eBay. The mounting bracket that came with it is too wide and doesn't extend far enough to bolt between the down tubes. So a new bracket was welded up with mounting nuts attached. I'm using these plastic tubing covers that close off the open ends of the frame. A few last pieces were welded to the frame, including these two brackets that the foot deck will sit and bolt to. This bracket was added to hold the brake cable which attaches to the rear drum brake. And the last item to be welded to the frame is a post which will hold a rear tail light. It will also be threaded on the end in order to mount a camera. With the frame fabrication finally completed, it's time to cut the pieces needed to enclose the frame. The spinning wheel of death has a cousin. His name is Diablo, and he chews up aluminum. Off camera, I attached the Diablo blade to a skill saw and the diamond plate was cut to size. The plate was then clamped down and pilot holes were drilled through both the plate and the frame at the same time. This will assure proper alignment later on. The diamond plate won't be riveted on until after the frame is painted. I bought this sheet of 1/2-inch thick maple plywood and took it over to my brother's house where he helped me cut it. I have to give a big thanks to my brother James for cutting out all the foot decking. Next up, it's about time we get this frame painted. Here's a tip. Get some of these foam earplugs, roll them up, and insert them inside your threaded holes to prevent paint from goobering up your threads. Another method, wrap some tape around a bolt leaving a few threads exposed. Then lightly thread in the bolt until the taped edge butts up against your working surface. First, I'm using this black epoxy primer made by Speedacoat. Next, I'm using an aerosol can. The color is Harley-Davidson Vivid Black. After that, another aerosol can with a color called Chromacoat Blue. This is a color-shifting chameleon paint made by Custom Cans. Last step, back to the spray gun to apply the clear coat made by Eurocam. And there you have it, the paint job is complete. Even though they call this color chromatic blue, you will see other colors like gold, orange, red, and purple depending on light direction or the angle you are viewing it from. Watch as I move this shop light around. You will see how fast the colors shift. And that's the end of part 1. Because of the size of this video, editing became impossible with the constant buffering and choppiness. Keep an eye out for part 2 where the scooter will be finished and ridden for the first time.